fresh off the presses from Flying Pig Games. The Rock of Chickamauga just showed up. Herman Luttman's new entry into the Black Swan series, which is itself a sort of family branch of the Blind Sword system that we first saw from Revolution Games. This is not a sequel, but it's the next entry in the same game series as A Most Fearful Sacrifice, 3 Days of Gettysburg, which came in this giant box and was known for its gigantic map and its beautiful production, and the Rock of Chickamauga looks like it's no exception. This was shipped to backers. I believe they did a Kickstarter on this last year, I think, maybe a little further back than that, and is, as you would expect, about the Battle of Chickamauga, which was a Confederate victory, I think most people would say. This is a huge game just from a footprint standpoint, so let's open this up and take a look. I know some other folks have done some unboxings of the game, but you know, the majesty here. Should mention the Kickstarter stretch goals. We got a bookmark here, example of the map art, and we've got these sort of mouse pad material little mats. These are nice. They're just used to mark for the scenarios to which parts of the map are in play or out of play. So you can kind of like box in the map so you don't have to guess or keep looking at the hexes. So nice little inclusion there. It also came with, and I put it in the box when it first got here, is a copy of the rules that is spiral bound, which is quite nice. I love this new trend of spiral bound rules happening in games right now. It makes it really easy to turn to a page and then flip it over when you're referencing something. So there is another regular staple bound copy of the rules in the game, but this is a stretch goal as well, and gives a second copy, which is nice. Speaking of, here is the packet of documentation, and we will look at that in a moment. Actually, let's look at it now. So again, you've got a staple bound version of the rules. Semi-gloss paper, very colorfully illustrated. I do understand that there are a few changes, small changes from Most Fearful Sacrifice, and I think there are probably some very game-specific things in this game that might be different from Gettysburg. But in general, I think probably, from what I understand, if you have played, here's an example of play, which is nice. If you have played Most Fearful Sacrifice, then you are going to be able to get through this pretty quickly, and it's going to be quite familiar. Rulebook. We got the scenarios book. This is a big, thick one. And is there a table of contents? No, it just starts with scenario 1. Get there firstest with the mostest. So again, it shows you what section of the gigantic map the scenario plays on. I think there's probably like 11 or 12 scenarios in here. Isolated Brigade. I think Herman Luttman and some other folks have been playing scenario 5 as like their first foray. The very birds are fighting. That takes place there. If you're familiar with the Battle of Chickamauga, it was kind of this like two lines of the Confederate and Union kind of along this river stream, and sort of this moving battle until they got fixed into battle lines that the Confederates kind of overran the Union position. A broken mass of howling demons. I really like their scenario names in this system. The Ditch of Death takes place down here in the corner. A lot of small scenarios here. So even though, as we will see, the map footprint is massive, this is a game that you can play in small bursts. And actually, on that point, I would like to point out that with A Most Fearful Sacrifice had this as well, that you could play these small scenarios. And I have a lot of complicated thoughts about A Most Fearful Sacrifice. I almost did a video on it several years ago when I played the full 3 days of Gettysburg. But I'll give you the Cliff Notes version here. I didn't want to post that video because it was made in kind of a state of heightened emotional reaction to what was going on. Here's the Fateful Order. I'll get back to that. Hold on one second. Longstreet Attacks. There. Makes, about 3/4 of one map. As you can see, they get bigger. Here's scenario 11. No charges you are. That's another small one, but probably, looks interesting. This takes place on 2. And it expands the footprint of the map. That's kind of interesting. I Never Saw Better Fighting. This maybe is the full campaign and the Terrible Sound. Usually there's a historical deployment and then a more free deployment. At least I know there was. You can see the number of units that are going to be in this. Scenario 14, A Barren Victory. So more scenarios than actually in Most Fearful Sacrifice. Let's just keep going. You can see how big the game gets with the number of units that are being deployed. Special Rules, A Desperate and Bold Movement. The Devil Went Down to Georgia. Yeah, so this is the campaign, basically. Yeah, looks like this might be the full thing. And then we've got some designer's notes here in the back. So 15 scenarios in the box. So as I was saying about Most Fearful Sacrifice. So I have problems with Most Fearful Sacrifice as a full campaign game. I don't think the game works for all 3 days of the battle. At least from a player experience perspective. I have played several scenarios out of Most Fearful Sacrifice, and I have played the historical 3-day scenario in Most Fearful Sacrifice. And my general opinion or my general feeling about the game is that if you are, it's not a very competitive, fun experience in the full campaign game. I think the scenarios in a Most Fearful Sacrifice are brilliant. They're very tense. They're very well balanced. They really sort of snapshot different positions of the Battle of Gettysburg quite well. And I think the game is best played, Most Fearful Sacrifice, as a scenario-based game. I think the full campaign has a lot of player experience problems. So for one, when you're playing the full campaign game, the activation disparity between the Confederate and Union command is so stacked in favor of the Union that playing the Confederates is very unfun. You essentially, once all the forces are deployed on the map, the Union are getting something like 11 activations to 3 or 12 to 4, or something like that from what I can recall. And as the Confederate player, you just get to watch the Union kind of do whatever they want for most of the turn, and then you maybe get to do something because the command die rolls for your formations and commanders as the Confederate player are not nearly as good as the Union's. And so when it's your turn to activate, a lot of the time you are activating, a couple of units or maybe a whole brigade, but you very rarely get the types of success that the Union gets where they get to move all of their units in a more coordinated command fashion. That may be reflective of history, but it comes across very scripted in the full 3 days. And I think it's a very poor experience actually for both players. Even if you're the Union, it doesn't feel good to be drawing 7 activations in a row and to just do what you want. And then the Confederate gets maybe like a partial activation or something. And so it really sucked a lot of the fun out of the game for me. Additionally, I think some of the changes to the system at this larger scale, being sort of demi-brigade scale, weren't great. So I don't like in Black Swan that the defensive fire happens when you move adjacent versus when in Blind Swords it happens when you institute a melee attack. I just think it combined with the poor command ability of some of the units in Most Fearful Sacrifice leads to these situations where the best you can do on any given turn is either throw in kind of a piecemeal attack. You never get an opportunity, rarely do you get an opportunity to send a whole line against a whole line. Usually you get a couple units to move in and get shot to pieces, or you do nothing because you don't want that to happen, and the game kind of devolves into this waiting game that isn't very fun to play. On top of that, and so you may be asking, why did I pick up Rock of Chickamauga if Most Fearful Sacrifice was not a really good time? I'm not saying I didn't have a good time in Most Fearful Sacrifice. I'm saying I didn't have a good time with the campaign scenario because I don't think it works as a gameplay experience. So the reason I picked up Rock of Chickamauga, and one of my main problems in Most Fearful Sacrifice that I think I heard, I checked, was that they changed some of the rules around entrenching and fortifications. One of the things that could happen in Most Fearful Sacrifice was because the Union has such a command advantage and a number of activation advantage, they could basically move their units wherever they wanted, put them in the positions they wanted, entrench them, and then it was nearly impossible to dislodge them. And it ground the game down to this really bloody stalemate where the Confederates either threw in these really bad attacks they know weren't going to go their way, or they did nothing. And the game just became a really unfortunate like grind where there was very little movement and a lot of really bad odds combats because it was so easy for the Union to dig in. Now, I've heard that the entrenchment rules in this might be a little different, and so that's why I wanted to play it, because at its core, I really liked the system. But I felt that the play experience in Most Fearful Sacrifice was frustrating and or boring and or poorly balanced. Not necessarily for victory conditions, but poorly balanced for like a play experience. So I'm probably, if Rock of Chickamauga, if it handles some of that stuff better, then I think I will really, really, really like it. And because I really like the core system and the core engine, and this battle, from what I've played of it in other games, is actually really interesting. I actually find it way more interesting than the Battle of Gettysburg, just from a situation standpoint. So I'm hoping Rock of Chickamauga kind of raises my opinion, especially of the sort of like full campaign game. I do think that the scenarios in this system are quite good and they're really awesome. And if you only ever got Rock of Chickamauga or Most Fearful Sacrifice to play the scenarios, you have a lot of content there and a lot of really good scenario design, at least as far as what I have played. I can't speak obviously to Rock of Chickamauga, but I suspect it will be similar. But that is how I would prefer to play Most Fearful Sacrifice, is by scenarios. I don't know that I would ever do the campaign again, the full 3 days, unless I'm playing with this sort of like free deployment version scenario rather than the historical, because I think it gives the Confederates a little more of a chance to kind of dictate some of their tempo, versus the historical one basically is kind of a lost cause right after day one. So anyways, that's enough of my thoughts about Most Fearful Sacrifice. I know it's kind of a critical darling. I know that a lot of people love it, and they should continue to love it. For me, it was not the Gettysburg campaign game that I was hoping for. Here is the Orders of Battle and the turn track and the victory point track, double-sided with the scenario setup guide. This is awesome to have. Tells you which units you need, so that when you go to organize this, you can easily tell what you need. Here's the command display. The way this game works is you're going to have cards based on your commanders. You're going to put their divisional priority. So you have core commander, and then you've got their divisions. And then you put their divisions in priority of activation. And based on how well you roll with your core commanders, you will activate some number of these divisions, and then those divisions will roll to activate. And so you get this layered cascading command system up and down. This is where I think Most Fearful Sacrifice falls apart in the campaign game, because I think the Confederate activation ratings are too bad, are poorer than they should be. Here's some more command displays. We've got Polk's Corps and Hill's Corps and Forest Cavalry and Wheeler's Cavalry. These are all single-sided. Interesting that they didn't go with the fold-out in this version. In Most Fearful Sacrifice, these were all on one large fold-out. Walker's Reserve. So a lot of table space here. You're going to need if you're going to play the campaign, you need to have room for 4 sheets. Union, probably the same thing. Thomas's 14th Corps, Crittenden's 21st, Granger Reserve, Mitchell's Cavalry, McCook's 20th. And here we have got the player aid. So this is a 2d10 percentile system with the combat tables here. This looks like very complicated and quite a lot, but it's actually quite easy once you start playing. You're basically just rolling to see where you fall, and then based on the color and type of result you get, you're going to trigger additional effects against the opponent. And, there's sometimes some column shifts for various situations. You get your combat ranges and so forth. On the back here, we have got, the close fight resolution. So when you have a close fight result, you flip this and you do that. I think that typically is melee. And then combat event table. So when you roll doubles, you might get different events based on the type of combat that you're engaged in. This is pretty fun. This is one of the areas where I think that Black Swan is better than Blind Swords, is having these little events when you roll doubles. They don't happen often, and a lot of the times when they happen, nothing would happen, but sometimes when they did, it was pretty dramatic and fun, cool narrative moments. There's 2 of these in the box. Terrain effects chart, some examples of the terrain, movement situations, movement costs, stacking limits, combat shifts, and this would be something you put on the table that both players can see. And then on the other side, you've got the sequence of play if you need it, command results table. You're going to be getting orders to your demi-brigades, and that tells you what they can do, and reminders about entrenching and rallying and so forth. So if you've played any other Black Swan or Blind Swords game, it's going to be pretty similar. The game comes with a bunch of different colored dice. You're going to roll some of these different things are going to require different dice to be rolled, and typically you're rolling 2 or 3 or 4 sometimes dice. They're different colored. I think it's 3 dice, 1 set for each player. They're different colored, so the results mean different things. You've got a deck of cards, so just like Blind Swords is chit system, Black Swan uses cards. So instead of chit pull, you're doing a deck of cards, and you'll draw one and activate, and then some of these cards are going to be events that allow you to do different things or let you take certain actions. So, that adds some variability and texture to the game. I do find the reliance on all of these games on things like Rebel Yell or effects that cause or force retreats without any sort of trade-in to be mildly annoying. There's always going to be stuff that's mildly annoying happen to you that no matter how well you plan or position, it's just going to, dissolve those plans or positioning. So some players will hate that. To me, I think it really depends. I think the fact that every Blind Swords game and Black Swan game has some sort of version of Rebel Yell, it's like, well, can we add some new creative design elements to the card deck so that they don't all feel the same game to game? But I get that certain things for the Civil War, people are looking for certain things. So in general, I'm a fan of this, but some of the times it feels very bad from a player perspective. So there's a lot of cards. There's 2 full decks in there, and a lot of the cards in here are also going to be the commanders, which I'll show you in a minute. We got some bonus dice as a stretch goal. These are, as you can see, colored with the pips, just like they would be colored for the regular dice. These are printed rather than pipped, and you can see there's an image of the leader on there. So we got to set for each of those. We have the counters here. I'll open those in a minute. And then we got the maps. I think the next thing to show you is the map footprint. So as you can see, this does not fit on my dining table. There is overhang on both sides of the table. There is overhang standing here. I'm standing up against the wall. And I think it's something like 15 square feet of the map, but it is beautiful. And you're going to need some big tables and a lot of space to play this game. It just keeps going and going and going, as you can see in the shot. Battle of Chickamauga. Here's Chickamauga Creek. So here's starting, I believe this is let's see, can I find a compass rose? Not sure which direction is north. I think north might be that way. anyways, we'll follow it along. So Chickamauga Creek, you've got the Union on one side, which I believe is this side, and the Confederates on this side, and they kind of are like marching kind of this direction. Creek comes up here, comes around here, comes in this direction, and they end up fighting an engagement in all of this terrain, and a lot of command confusion, and the Union pulls guys away to reinforce a flank, and then the Confederates overrun that flank. So this is going to be a fun one to play, I think. There's just a lot of interesting decisions to be made with the road network and where you're going with sort of your troops and where you set your battle lines. Because eventually it will come to lines of troops firing at each other in these woods and maybe in some of the clear terrain around the creek. And apologies, I don't know who the, here's Missionary Ridge right here. I don't know who the map artist for this is. Unfortunately, it's not credited in the rules or on the back of the box. It lists some names about people who are involved in this game, but there's not like a map by. It's not Rick Barber, obviously, as we know. Most Fearful Sacrifice was him, but whoever the map artist is here did an amazing job capturing his style, and it fits really nicely. The color palette fits really nicely with Most Fearful Sacrifice's design, and it's just very beautiful. It's a work of art, honestly. One of the big appeals of this game is just how big the boards are and how wonderful the map looks. The elevations are very clear. The greens really give it that, heavily vegetative look of the country, this part of the country at the time. And and it's, bisected by Chickamauga Creek as it goes through there. So a lot of fun to be had on this map. And again, a lot of the scenarios take place in very specific parts of this. I'm really interested in this battle, especially after having played it in Rebel Fury, about how interesting that scenario was. I'm curious to see how that translates to a more detailed and tactical system. I'm just looking real quick at the turn track over here. I think the full battle is 2 days, because there's an overnight, 3 days actually. So this one, this one's a monster. Let's take a look at some of the other stuff. So here we have some of the cards that you're going to be seeing. So we've got cards. These act as basically chits, right? So for chit pull. So we've got a pile of Confederate events and a pile of Union events. You're going to basically pick some number of these every turn to include in the deck and then draw some randomly. So you'll always have a mix of stuff that you're not totally sure of what you've got in there. There's some general global things like Fog of War cards or Friction of War cards that can cause some confusion on the battlefield for one side or the other. And then, of course, you've got the cards for the commanders. So you've got, the Mitchell's Cavalry Corps, Mitchell from the Cavalry Corps. And, if his card comes up, like if you draw the commander for that, let's see if I can find it in here. So like if you draw Thomas, for example, this is your commander-in-chief, you'll activate one division from the 14th Corps. So if you, depending on the, the number, which 14th Corps units you have, you would roll, here's Reynolds, for example, you would roll a D6, and then based on the result you'd get some number of unit activations from that division. Here's Davis in the 20th and Johnson. And so these will be put in a priority order, and so some of them will activate more often than others based on the overall Corps commander here. So you can see that if you roll at least, 66% of the time, you're going to get both divisional priorities in the 14th Corps. But if you roll a 6, you're going to get basically all the units in the Corps. So the command and control is modeled sort of in a partial random chance. It's like a curve, probability curves. This is can be the most frustrating part of the game. When you have an average leader, sometimes you roll a 1 and you get nothing. And I felt like in Most Fearful Sacrifice, the curves were skewed so in favor of the Union that it was almost impossible for the Confederates to do stuff, even stuff that they did historically. But as you can see, there's a big stack of them. When you play the whole, you're not going to use all of these in every scenario, but when you play the whole campaign, all of these cards are going to be placed on the command displays, and then depending on the activation order that comes out of the event deck, you're going to roll and do those things. So those are the cards. Let's take a look next at the counters. So I think we've got 4 sheets of counters in here. These are really well done. I really like not only the material and the finish, but the art on them, the color choices. These are your markers, so marking VP hexes and moved artillery, bivouacking at night, which I hope the rules on this are a little bit clearer in this game, because the bivouacking stuff was just so hard to mentally retain. It was a very confusing process. Hasty works, units can be in different formations, skirmish order, and what have you. So these are just your general markers. They're double-sided, and they remind you what they do on the back. Here we've got the units. So here we've got the Union, and these come out quite easily. So these are all individual counters, and these are about, I would say, 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch. I don't have my tape measure with me, but they're very, very nice. And they're organized by, here's the Commander-in-Chiefs. Looking, these stripes, so here's 14th Corps, here's the division, I believe, and then I believe the letters represent the some other formation that they might be a part of. Yeah. So you can see the command structure on the counters. The stars, I think, represent the number of counters in the formation. So, you know, if you see 3, you've got 3 in Croxton here. And then these numbers here are going to be, the red, I believe, is their morale, which you're going to be testing quite a lot. And this, I believe, is their combat strength, if I'm not mistaken. Units, I think, have a uniform movement in this system, so you don't need to print them on the counters. These are also double-sided. You can become battle-worn, which is basically a step loss. So we've got the Union, a lot of units there, artillery, so forth. Artillery, by the way, rated for, I think, what kind of they are. So you've got smoothbore, you've got mixed, and I think you have rifled artillery as well sometimes. Here we have the Confederates. A little bit of a color palette change from Most Fearful Sacrifice. So Most Fearful Sacrifice, they were more of a butternut color, like a squash color. And in this game, they are more gray. And I think this was done because of player feedback. I'm not quite sure what went on there. I did not mind the butternut color. I think that was, I believe that was more close to the historical color of their uniforms, but now we've got a much more gray color there, which is usually used by games. Here's the rest of the Confederates. Command structure is a little different here. Obviously their divisions were larger. And then we have got shaken markers. So when you test morale and you fail, you'll become shaken, or possibly all units shaken. So if like you need to mark a stack or whatever. So anyways, very beautiful, very well done. They're gonna fit in the hexes nicely. It's a big game, but that's because the production is very large. It's very nice to play with components that are this big. So that is a look at Rock of Chickamauga from Flying Pig Games and designer Herman Luttman. I'm excited to play this at some point. When I played Most Fearful Sacrifice, I played that around Christmas time, the year it came out. And I think I probably want to do the same with this. This is when I have time, when I'm off of work, can set this up, leave it set up, play, you know, for 6-7 hours in a day, and really get an experience of this. So when I do play it, I will post a video of my thoughts. Hopefully, I can compare and contrast to the way I felt about Most Fearful Sacrifice after I've actually played it. But in the meantime, if you have played this or have thoughts about the scenario design or even the campaign, if you've managed to get it out and played already, I would really love to hear your impressions of Rock of Chickamauga, especially as it compares to the last game in the series. I am a fan of what is going on here. I think the implementation, it can be improved in certain areas based on my play of Most Fearful Sacrifice, and I hope Rock of Chickamauga delivers to me that experience that I'm hoping for. But so the production quality at least looks amazing. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.